The emergency transmission crackled through the void, reaching the Galactic Defense Network's Central Command on Kepler Station. Commander Zethka of the Altarian 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion pressed his four-fingered hand against the communication panel, his blue-scaled features tight with worry. "This is Recon 3 to Central Command. We have a situation on Zarion 7. The mining colony is under attack by Vorthan raiders. Colony shields are failing, civilians trapped in the lower tunnels. We're outnumbered 4 to 1 and taking heavy casualties. Request immediate backup assistance." The response came swift and professional through the Galactic Communication Network. "Acknowledged, Recon 3. Backup units are being dispatched to your location. Ada, 12 standard hours. Hold your position and protect the civilians." Zethka's relief was short-lived as another explosion rocked the temporary command post he'd established in the colony's main administrative building. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the red energy bolts of Vorthan plasma rifles, lighting up the artificial twilight of Zarion 7's dome-covered settlement. His squad of 12 Altarian warriors had already lost 3 members, and their defensive position was becoming increasingly untenable. The Vorthans were ruthless pirates who specialized in raiding isolated mining colonies. Their technology was crude but effective, and they made up for any tactical shortcomings with sheer brutality and overwhelming numbers. Reports indicated at least 50 raiders had landed on the small moon's surface, far more than Zethka's reconnaissance unit was equipped to handle. "Sir," called out Sergeant Vexley, his usually steady voice showing strain, "the eastern perimeter is buckling. They're pushing hard toward the civilian shelters." Zethka's species, the Altarians, were known throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic skills and analytical minds. They were capable soldiers, but their military doctrine favored careful planning and coordinated actions with allied forces. Being caught alone against a superior enemy force was exactly the kind of situation their training taught them to avoid. "Fall back to defensive position, Beta," Zethka ordered, his tactical training taking over. "Set up overlapping fields of fire and buy us time. The civilians must remain protected until backup arrives." As his remaining soldiers repositioned, Zethka couldn't help but wonder what kind of backup Central Command would send. Most likely another reconnaissance unit, or perhaps a standard patrol squadron from one of the nearby systems. The Kepler defense grid maintained various species in their ranks: Centaurian heavy infantry, Ciarian tech specialists, or maybe even a Vraxian assault team. If they were fortunate, 12 hours seemed like an eternity. The battle raged on through the artificial night cycle of Zarion 7. The Vorthans proved to be more organized than initial reports suggested, coordinating their attacks with military precision rather than the usual pirate chaos. They systematically targeted the colony's defensive installations while pushing inexorably toward the underground shelters where nearly 200 civilian miners and their families had taken refuge. Zethka's forces held 3 critical choke points leading to the shelter entrances, but their ammunition was running low and fatigue was setting in. The Altarian physiology, while excellent for sustained mental effort, wasn't designed for prolonged combat operations. Their energy levels were dropping noticeably. "Commander," Vexley reported during a brief lull in the fighting, "we're down to 30% ammunition reserves. Medical supplies are nearly depleted, and we've lost another soldier." The mathematics were becoming uncomfortably clear. With 8 effective soldiers remaining and limited resources, they could hold their positions for perhaps 6 more hours at most. The backup forces needed to arrive soon, or this would become a massacre. As dawn broke over Zarion 7's artificial atmosphere, the Vorthan assault intensified. Their leader, a scarred beast named Krulex, had apparently grown tired of the prolonged siege. The pirates began using heavier weapons, bringing up plasma cannons that they'd salvaged from various raids. "All units, this is Recon 3, Zethka transmitted to his scattered squad. "Heavy weapons incoming? Prepare for final defensive positions. We hold this line no matter what." It was then that the scanners picked up incoming ships. 3 vessels dropping out of hyperspace right on schedule, 12 hours after the original distress call. Zethka felt a surge of hope as he activated his long-range communications. Incoming vessels, this is Commander Zethka, Altarian 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. Situation is critical. We have confirmed 50-plus hostiles with heavy weapons, 200 civilians in underground shelters, and my unit is at minimal operational capacity. The response came in a voice that sounded strange to Altarian ears, a rough, confident tone speaking in heavily accented Galactic Standard. This is Major Sarah Chun, Terran Expeditionary Force. We copy your situation. Commander. Human backup is inbound. Clear us a landing zone and keep those civilians safe for 5 more minutes. Zethka blinked in surprise. Humans? He'd heard of the species, of course, the newest member of the Galactic Defense Network, having achieved interstellar travel only recently in galactic terms. They'd been admitted to the Alliance primarily for their industrial capacity and their unusual ability to adapt to various planetary conditions. Most galactic military leaders considered them useful support personnel but inexperienced in actual combat operations. Still, backup was backup. Acknowledged, Major Chun. Landing Zone Alpha is clear. Coordinates follow. Be advised, hostiles are armed with plasma weaponry and have numerical superiority. Copy that, Commander. We're aware of the tactical situation. Terran units are trained for numerical disadvantage scenarios. 8 to 3 minutes. 3 minutes later, Zethka watched through his tactical scope as the human vessels descended toward the colony. They weren't the sleek, elegant ships he'd expected from a backing force. Instead, they were angular, utilitarian craft that looked more like flying fortresses than traditional military transports. As they touched down, ramps dropped with mechanical precision, and figures in heavy combat armor began emerging at a run. What struck Zethka first was the sheer speed and coordination of the human deployment. Within seconds of touchdown, the new arrivals had established a defensive perimeter around their landing zone and begun advancing toward the sound of gunfire. They moved with an efficiency that spoke of extensive training and actual combat experience. The humans were bigger than he'd expected, their armor bulky but somehow streamlined. Each soldier carried what appeared to be projectile weapons rather than energy-based arms, and they advanced in formation patterns that Zethka didn't immediately recognize from standard galactic military doctrine. Recon 3, this is Chun. We're moving to support your positions. What's your ammunition status? Nearly exhausted, Zethka replied honestly. We have perhaps 200 rounds remaining across all weapons. Understood. Fall back to position Charlie when we engage. Let us take point. The Altarian commander was about to protest that his species didn't abandon their posts when the sound of human weapons erupted across the battlefield. The noise was unlike anything he'd experienced, not the clean hum and crack of plasma fire, but a rapid, thunderous barking that seemed to shake the air itself. Through his scope, Zethka watched in amazement as the human soldiers advanced with methodical precision. They didn't charge headlong into battle like the berserker species he'd heard about, nor did they rely on superior technology like the more advanced civilizations. Instead, they moved with calculated aggression, using the terrain and their weapons in ways that maximized their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure. The Vorthans, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of fresh troops using unfamiliar tactics, began to falter. Their initial rush toward the human positions met with devastating crossfire from multiple angles. The projectile weapons that the humans wielded seemed to penetrate Vorthan armor with disturbing ease, and their rate of fire was far higher than anything the pirates had encountered before. "By the void," whispered Vexley, watching the engagement through his own optical device. "They fight like they've done this 1,000 times." Zethka was beginning to understand that Central Command hadn't just sent them backup, they'd sent them specialists. The humans fought with a ferocity and competence that belied their reputation as newcomers to galactic warfare. Every movement was purposeful, every shot calculated, and their communication discipline was flawless. Within minutes, the tactical situation had completely reversed. The Vorthans found themselves pinned down and taking casualties at an alarming rate. Their numerical advantage meant nothing when they couldn't effectively engage their targets, and the human tactics were clearly designed to negate superior numbers through superior positioning and firepower. Major Chun's voice crackled over the communication channel again. Commander Zethka, we're going to push the hostiles back from your perimeter. When we do, I need your people to guide us to the civilian shelters. We're going to make sure every single person on this colony gets home safely. There was something in the human major's tone that convinced Zethka she meant exactly what she said. It wasn't bravado or military posturing. It was a simple statement of intent backed by the kind of competence he was witnessing on the battlefield. As he walked, the Vorthan retreat was more organized than Zethka had anticipated. Rather than breaking into chaotic flight, the pirates fell back to predetermined positions around the mining facility's central processing plant. Their leader, Krulex, was apparently more tactically sound than the typical raider captain. Major Chun appeared at Zethka's position with 3 of her soldiers in tow. Up close, the humans were even more imposing than they'd seen through his scope. The Major stood nearly 2 meters tall, her armor scarred but functional, and her movements carried the easy confidence of someone who had survived many battles. "Commander," she said, removing her helmet to reveal features that were somehow both softer and harder than Altarian facial structure. Her skin was darker than the pale blue of his species, and her eyes held an intensity that spoke of absolute focus. "What can you tell me about the civilian shelter locations and the facility layout?" Zethka accessed his tactical display and projected a holographic map between them. 212 civilians in 3 separate underground shelters, here, here, and here. The shelters were designed to withstand mining accidents, so they're structurally sound, but they only have 48 hours of life support. And the hostiles? The Vorthans have concentrated around the processing plant. Our best estimate is 42 remaining raiders. They've set up heavy weapons positions covering all approaches to their location and the main shelter entrances. Major. Chun studied the map with the same methodical attention that her soldiers had shown during their assault. After a moment, she nodded and gestured to one of her companions. "Sergeant Martinez, assessment." The human she'd indicated stepped forward, his helmet also removed to reveal a weathered face marked by old scars. "Standard siege scenario, ma'am. They're using the processing plant as a fortress and the civilians as leverage. They probably want safe passage off-world in exchange for not harming the miners." "That would be the typical Vorthan approach," Zethka confirmed. "They rarely kill civilians unnecessarily. It's bad for business and draws unwanted attention from the defense network. But they will if their demands aren't met." Major Chun's expression darkened. "Understood. How many different ways into that processing facility?" 7 main entrances, plus maintenance access points and the ore transport tunnels. "But Commander," Zethka felt compelled to warn, "the Vorthans have had hours to prepare their defenses. A direct assault would be extremely costly." The Major exchanged glances with her sergeant, and Zethka caught something that might have been amusement in their expressions. "Commander," Chun said carefully, "human military doctrine doesn't typically favor direct assaults when alternatives exist. Tell me about those maintenance tunnels." Over the next hour, Zethka found himself receiving an education in human, tactical thinking that completely contradicted everything he'd learned about their species. Rather than planning a straightforward attack, the humans approached the problem like a complex puzzle with multiple solutions. Sergeant Martinez and 2 other soldiers disappeared into the tunnel systems with equipment that Zethka didn't recognize. Major Chun positioned her remaining forces in what appeared to be completely illogical locations until the Altarian commander realized they were designed to provide overlapping fields of fire that would funnel any Vorthan movement into predetermined kill zones. "Major," Zethka ventured, "if you don't mind my asking, what exactly is your unit's specialization?" The Defense Network records list Terran forces as general support personnel. Chun's smile was sharp and completely predatory. "The records are technically accurate, Commander. We are support personnel. We support our allies by making sure their enemies don't get back up." The first indication that the human plan was in motion came from an unexpected direction. Instead of weapon fire or explosions, Zethka heard what sounded like machinery shutting down. The constant hum of the processing plant's power system suddenly went silent. Martinez to Major Chun, came the voice over the communication channel. Package delivered. Main power grid is down, backup systems are isolated, and we've got eyes on the hostiles. They're not happy about losing their lights. Copy that, Sergeant. Phase 2 is go. What happened next challenged everything Zethka thought he understood about military operations. Rather than immediately pressing their advantage, the humans waited. For nearly 30 minutes, they maintained their positions while the Vorthans inside the darkened facility grew increasingly agitated. During this time, Major Chun kept up a steady stream of communication with the raider leader. Not negotiations exactly, but a series of offers that became progressively less favorable to the pirates. Safe passage off-world became safe passage to the nearest prison facility, which became surrender for processing by galactic authorities. You're making them choose between bad options and worse options, Zethka observed. Psychological pressure, Chun confirmed. Humans learned a long time ago that an enemy who defeats himself saves everyone a lot of ammunition and casualties. The Vorthans are sitting in the dark, knowing we're out here, knowing their situation is deteriorating, and knowing that every minute they wait, their position gets worse. The breakthrough came when one of the Vorthan sub-commanders apparently decided that discretion was indeed the better part of valor. A group of 8 raiders suddenly burst from one of the secondary exits. Attempting to break through to their landing craft, they ran directly into a human ambush. That was so perfectly timed and positioned that not a single shot was wasted. The fleeing Vorthans were taken down with clinical precision, their weapons seized, and their communication equipment captured intact. This is Corporal Jackson to Major Chun. We've got their tactical frequencies and equipment codes. The remaining hostiles just lost their secure communications. Chun's expression became decidedly predatory. Outstanding, Corporal. Sergeant Martinez, you're cleared for Phase 3? What followed was a masterpiece of psychological warfare that left Zethka both impressed and slightly disturbed. Using the captured communication equipment, the humans began feeding false information to different groups of Vorthans within the facility. Sub-commanders were told that other units had surrendered. Individual soldiers received messages, supposedly from their leaders ordering them to fall back to positions that didn't exist. Within an hour, the remaining Vorthans were completely confused about their own tactical situation, separated from effective command and control, and starting to surrender in small groups rather than face what they perceived as an overwhelming and highly organized enemy force. Sir, Vexley whispered to Zethka as they watched another group of demoralized pirates emerge from the facility with their hands raised. They're not just defeating the Vorthans, they're making them defeat themselves. The final phase of the operation was almost anticlimactic. Krulix himself, isolated and abandoned by most of his followers, made a last desperate attempt to use the civilian shelters as leverage. He barricaded himself in the control room that operated the shelter, life support systems, and demanded safe passage off World. Major Chun's response was swift and final. Using the facility's own maintenance systems, her soldiers introduced a fast-acting but harmless sedative gas into the control room's ventilation system. 20 minutes later, they simply walked in and arrested the unconscious pirate leader. Total casualties. Major Chun reported to Zethka as they stood watching the last of the Vorthans being loaded into secure transport containers. 0 civilian deaths, 0 human casualties, 3 minor injuries among your forces during the initial engagement. All hostiles captured alive and available for interrogation by galactic authorities. Zethka stared at the human major in something approaching awe. Major Chun, with respect, your species' military reputation may need some updating. What we just witnessed was not typical support personnel behavior. Chin's smile was genuinely warm this time, lacking the predatory edge it had held during the operation. Commander, humans have a saying, the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. We've learned to use that to our advantage. As the human soldiers began their post-operation procedures, Zethka noticed something that impressed him almost as much as their tactical competence. Despite having just fought a battle, They immediately began assisting with civilian evacuation, providing medical aid to anyone who needed it, and helping repair damaged infrastructure. Your combat engineers as well? He asked Sergeant Martinez, who was currently helping to restore power to one of the civilian residential areas. Every human soldier receives cross-training in multiple specialties, Martinez replied, not looking up from the power coupling he was repairing. We might be the newest species in the Galactic Alliance, but we've been fighting wars on our homeworld for thousands of years. We've learned to be adaptable. Major Chun approached, having finished her post-battle reports. Commander Zethka, my compliments to you and your soldiers. You held an impossible position for 12 hours against superior numbers and prevented civilian casualties until we could arrive. That took courage and competence. The Altarian commander found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about human military capabilities. Major, if you don't mind my asking, what would have happened if we had requested a full combat unit instead of? 6 months after the Zarian 7 incident, Commander Zethka found himself standing in the briefing room aboard the Galactic military station Kepler Prime, facing a collection of senior officers from 12 different species. The holographic display showed tactical data from 3 dozen recent operations where human units had provided backup support to Allied forces. The results were uniformly impressive and consistently surprising. Admiral Vexver, a massive Centaurian whose species prided itself on military prowess, gestured toward the display with one of his 4 arms. Commander Zethka, your initial assessment of human military capabilities has prompted a galaxy-wide review of our tactical doctrines. These humans are changing everything we thought we knew about warfare. Zethka nodded respectfully. In the months since Zarian 7, he'd received dozens of communications from other commanders who had worked with human units. The stories were remarkably consistent. Operations that should have taken days were completed in hours. Casualty rates were dramatically reduced, and enemies who should have fought to the death were surrendering in unprecedented numbers. With respect, Admiral, Zethka replied, I believe the issue isn't that humans are changing warfare. They're revealing that the rest of us have been approaching it incorrectly. The statement caused a stir among the assembled officers. General Kriksta of the Sarian Defense Corps, a species known for their analytical precision, leaned forward. Explain that assessment, Commander. Zethka activated his personal tactical display, showing footage from the Zarian 7 operation. Most galactic species approach military conflict as either a display of technological superiority or a test of physical prowess. We fight to demonstrate dominance or to achieve specific territorial goals. Humans fight differently. The display shifted to show human soldiers during the operation, not in their moments of combat, but in the aftermath. Treating wounded enemies, repairing damaged infrastructure, ensuring civilian welfare, and conducting detailed analysis of everything that had occurred. They fight to solve problems permanently, Zethka continued. When we requested backup, we expected additional firepower to help us hold a position until the situation could be resolved by higher authorities. What we received was a unit that resolved the entire situation themselves, captured every enemy for intelligence gathering, preserved all civilian life, and left the colony in better condition than before the attack. Major Chun, who had been invited to this review as a subject matter expert, spoke from her position near the back of the room. If I may, Commander Zethka has identified something that most species seem to find surprising about human military philosophy. We don't fight battles, we fight wars. Every engagement is viewed as part of a larger strategic picture. Admiral Vexver's massive brow ridge furrowed in concentration. Elaborate on this distinction, Major. Chun moved to the front of the room with the casual confidence that Zethka had learned to associate with human military personnel. Most galactic species treat individual conflicts as isolated events. You win or lose a battle, then move on to the next one. Humans learned millennia ago that this approach is inefficient and ultimately counterproductive. She gestured toward the tactical displays. When we captured the Vorthan raiders instead of simply defeating them, We gained intelligence on 17 other pirate operations, 34 slave trading routes, and the location of 6 illegal weapons manufacturing facilities. That one backup operation led to the dismantling of an entire criminal network. The implications were staggering, and Zethka could see the recognition dawning on faces throughout the briefing room. The humans hadn't just solved the immediate problem. They had eliminated the source of dozens of future problems. General Kriksta was studying his own tactical pad intently. According to these reports, human units have achieved similar results in 23 separate operations over the past 6 months. Pirates, slavers, illegal mining operations, and even 3 separate terrorist cells, all dismantled through what were supposedly simple backup missions. Which brings us to the purpose of today's meeting, Admiral Lexfer announced. The Galactic Defense Council has been reviewing the classification system for Allied military units. Major Chun, your species' forces are currently listed as support personnel with limited combat experience. Do you have any objections to a potential reclassification? Chun's expression became carefully neutral. Admiral, humans prefer to be evaluated based on results rather than classifications. We'll serve in whatever capacity the Alliance believes we can be most useful. It was, Zethka realized, a perfect example of human diplomatic strategy. They weren't demanding recognition or status. They were simply demonstrating competence and allowing others to draw the appropriate conclusions. The next few hours were spent reviewing detailed after-action reports from across the galaxy. The pattern was unmistakable. When human units were involved in operations, casualty rates dropped, mission success rates increased, and long-term strategic benefits were consistently achieved. But perhaps most importantly, Allied forces that had worked with humans reported dramatic improvements in their own tactical effectiveness. The humans shared their knowledge freely, offering training and consultation to any species that requested it. There's something else, Zethka added during a break in the formal presentations. Human forces have been invited to participate in joint training exercises with 7 different species military academies. Not as students, as instructors? Admiral Vexver looked genuinely surprised. The Vraxian warrior academies are requesting human instructors? The Vraxians who consider themselves the premier combat specialists in the galaxy? According to General Vrexkar, human tactical doctrine has improved Vraxian unit effectiveness by 37% in simulation exercises, Zethka confirmed. He specifically requested that human advisors be assigned to their elite formations. Major Chun shifted uncomfortably, and Zethka sensed that the human was struggling with something. Major, you seem concerned? Commander Admiral, with respect. There's something about human military philosophy that I think needs to be clearly understood, Chun said carefully. We're not trying to become the dominant military force in the galaxy. Our goal is to make every Allied force more effective, which makes the entire Alliance stronger. She paused, choosing her words with obvious care. Humans learn through hard experience that the strongest military isn't the one with the best individual warriors or the most advanced technology. The strongest military is the one where every unit, every soldier, and every ally can trust that they will never fight alone. The words hung in the air for a moment, and Zethka felt their weight. It was a philosophy so fundamentally different from traditional galactic military thinking that it was almost incomprehensible to most species. Admiral Vexver was the first to speak. Major Chun, are you telling us that human military doctrine is designed around making your allies stronger rather than demonstrating your own superiority? Yes, sir. On our homeworld, we had a saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. We learned that protecting that weak link and helping it become stronger was more effective than simply replacing it with a stronger component. The review committee spent another hour discussing the implications. Before reaching their conclusion, when Admiral Vexver announced the decision, it was with obvious satisfaction. Effective immediately, Terran forces are reclassified from support personnel to strategic integration specialists. Human units will be prioritized for deployment in situations requiring coordination between multiple Allied forces. complex tactical scenarios, and operations where long-term strategic benefits are as important as immediate tactical success. But as the meeting concluded and officers began filing out, Admiral HFY made one additional announcement that surprised everyone, including Major Chun. Additionally, the Galactic Defense Council has approved the establishment of the first Interspecies Tactical Development Center, to be located on Earth and staffed primarily by human personnel. All allied species are invited to send their best officers for advanced tactical training and joint doctrine development. HFY watched Major Chun's face carefully as this announcement was made. The human's expression showed surprise, but also something else, a kind of quiet pride that spoke of deep satisfaction. Later, as they walked together toward the transport bays, HFY voiced the question that had been bothering him since the Zarian 7 operation. Major, when we first requested backup, did you know that your response would lead to all of this? Chun was quiet for a long moment. Commander, when humans receive a request for help, we don't just respond to the immediate need. We respond to the underlying problem that created that need. When you call for backup, we heard an ally asking for help against forces that threatened innocent people. Our response was designed to ensure that those specific forces would never threaten anyone again. But surely you didn't expect to end up training other species' military forces? Chun's smile was warm and genuine. Commander, humans have learned that the best way to ensure our own security is to ensure that our allies are strong enough to protect themselves and each other. When we help you become better soldiers, we're not diminishing our own importance. We're creating